take these one at a time because each one is a little bit different. It'll give you some things to think about when working with this one. So I'll do this one first. They're all saved as JPEGs, which means as far as layers are concerned, there's only one layer that you're working with. Let's put this away. And I'll drag it over here. I've got my design on one side and I've got my mock-up on this side. First thing you need to do is whatever design that you have, you need to place it on its own layer. So in this case, it's simply a matter of cutting it and pasting it. If you go to Edit, tell you what, let's Edit and Cut. And then if I paste it, you can see in my layers, it's pasted onto its own layer by itself. This way all I got to do is move it around. When you place it onto this area, of course you can scale it down to make it fit. It'll be pretty close to the exact size. In our case, it's going to be slightly larger. I'll zoom in so you can see the edges. Slightly larger than the area that you want. That is okay too. What we're going to do is we're going to clean it up to make it fit exactly that size. You never want to stretch or skew your design, but you do want it to fill the area. The other thing to pay attention to is little details like her hands. What's wrong with the hand right here? It's cut off. In the original, it's actually behind it, or excuse me, in front of it. So what we need to do, once we've placed it on here, is make a clipping mask or a layer mask, and then we need to clean up and paint inside of that particular area. If I grab my brush, anywhere that I paint black will unmask that area. Whoop. Make sure I'm on the right area, and full opacity. Anywhere that I paint white will remask that area as well. The other thing to consider about a mock-up, it's just a mock-up. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but you can put in a lot of detail that you want to in it as well. If I wanted to trim up these edges, I can select one side and then kind of paint into it and trim it down as well. So now this gives me an idea of what a mock-up would look like. Because there's a person there, it gives me a sense of scale for the design that I have. Especially if a client says, hey, I need to make this into a poster for a specific frame. They'll send you to a website. A lot of these websites will give you the exact dimensions, and then you can show them what it would look like before it's printed on there as well. Pretty cool? So this is an easy one. The main thing to remember, make sure your design is on its layer by itself. Then we can use a layer mask to make it look exactly the same. When I'm finished, I'm just going to flatten this and save it as a regular JPEG from here. We don't have to worry about anything else. Billboard is going to be a little bit more difficult. Blimp is going to be a little bit more difficult. Let's do the blimp next. I'll show you what the billboard. With this one, we don't exactly have a flat surface. We've got a curved surface. I'm going to do the same thing. Select the area. We're going to cut it and paste it. Command X, Command V. And we'll move it over here. Remember, it's in its own layer by itself. I can scale this down. And then I need to place it inside of here. Now remember, with our perspective, it's not enough just to scale it down and to put it onto here. I've got to actually skew it. I've got to make one edge, this edge is closer, and this edge is farther away. So I've got to make it line up along the edges of this as well. To do this, you can go to Edit, Transform. I like to use the Distortion Transform. I've never had a good use for a perspective. It's a little bit difficult to use. But with Distort, I can select any of the edges or the corners and I can move it in and place it into perspective. Pretty cool? You can see how a few clicks it gives me that sense from there. If I go too far, it's going to start looking something like this, and it'll actually distort the size that I have. So just very, very subtly, do I want to give it a little bit of a distortion to make it match that kind of perspective. I can stay with that. The second thing is I need to make it curved a little bit. Another form of transforming is to warp. With warp, I get this little mesh, and I can click on, there's actually Bezier handles in the center, and I can curve the edges to it. It gives me a little bit of a warping. In this case, I want it to kind of match the curvature of the blimp. I could do the top just barely. It's really not curving all that much. And hit return. That's looking a little bit more in perspective. I could tweak it a little bit. The perspective is off. If I did need to undo something, well, if I go back into transform now, the layer selected, it's going to transform the entire area again. In other words, I've lost the corners. The corners are now out here. So I could do this, but you may have to actually undo everything that you've done. The final thing, it's not going to show up on here, is I can match the shadows that are behind here. Since it's black and white, it's relatively easy. If I go under normal to multiply, this will add that bit of a shadow to there as well. Makes it look a little bit more realistic. This will come into play if you on some of the other designs that I'll show you. If I kept it normal, I can see it better from here. But this, again, will give me a better sense of scale and a sense of size. So once you place it on its own layer, the second thing you can do is do a transformation with this one. Pretty cool? Okay, let's see if we can get more difficult. Let me show you the box. Once again, the box one, just as simple as the other one. Let me show you the importance of changing up the blending mode. If I was to select one of the designs, Command X to cut, Command V to paste. It's on its own layer. I can scale it down. I can do a distortion. And remember, we want it to fit. I'm looking at the edges along here, making them parallel to that particular side. That looks like it would fit. Hit return. Now if I change my blending mode to multiply, it gets rid of the whites and it actually looks like it's a part of the box itself. Same way for fragile if I was to place it on this side. Once I'm done, flatten it, and you can place it in there as well. You won't have to watch me do the whole thing.
Does the direct selection tool work the same way or no?
In Photoshop, you don't have a direct selection tool. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Under the text tool?
Under the text, if I'm working in a vector path, you can do vectors in Photoshop, but I'm not working with vectors.
Okay.
I'm actually working with the pixels that are in here. What you're saying does make sense. If I had actually drew off one of these boxes like a rectangle or an ellipse or a polygon.
Okay.
But since I'm working in layers, it has pixels, just the regular black arrow selection is what we need up here. Good question though. Let's do the billboard. With this one, I'm going to show you there's a new tool that you can also use that makes this a little bit easier. Again, I need to cut out my area. This time, I'm not going to paste it. I could paste it down and then I can use my distortion tools to make it fit up in here. But I'm going to show you a more interesting method. Instead of pasting, I'm going to make a new blank layer. You'll see why in just a second. Photoshop, if you go under Filter, has a filter called Vanishing Point. And this is kind of a mini program in itself. With this one, I can actually tell it what vanishing point, what area I want to work within. Right now, I need to select my grid, so I'm going to click once, and you can see it will start to draw the appropriate line. And I need 4 corners to work with then. That looks pretty good. So I've got a little meshed area. I can pull it out, And it will stay in perspective. Actually, you can see it kind of getting closer as I pull out from there. And I may need to clean it up just a little bit. But I've selected the entire area that I'm working within. That looks good too. If I pasted now, Command V, paste, I've got it in here. Here's the fun part. This tool right here in the corner will allow me to move things around and scale it. Watch what happens when I move it into that area. It snaps into it. It actually stays in perspective, and it will crop it to that area. Now, since I'm using this tool, I can also scale it down. Be sure to hold down Shift. And I can move it into place and keep it relatively in order. The downside to this is you need to make sure your design fits the area appropriately. If it's the wrong perspective or the wrong, not perspective, wrong proportion, it's not going to fill up, it's not going to work. In this case, the proportions are off a little bit. This will tell me how much it's off or how much it needs to be. What I want you to do, get it as close as possible. In this case, you can see it's not going to work 100%. But if I hit return, now I can hit OK. And you can see in that layer 1, here it is placed in here. Now what am I missing for this layer? My curves. This is where you would go in, turn on your layer mask, and you would actually paint in the rest of the area. Grab your paintbrush. And clean up those edges.
Are you just holding Shift down?
I am, yes. If you ever want to paint a straight line, click once, and then hold down Shift, and it'll paint straight across, and I won't have to worry with the rest of it. Same way with over here, clean up those edges. The other thing you can do, if you click once, then go to your endpoint, and then hold Shift and click, it'll connect those two endpoints as well. And you can see I've gotten off by a little bit. You can do a better job than I've done. Again, convert that to multiply, and then it'll clean up the rest of those edges as well. So it looks like it actually fits in that area. Let's do another one. Let me show you kind of the power that you have with that one. Same way with the building sign. You've got this design. Choose your area. You can either use your distortion or your vanishing point and place it inside of this one. Here's a fun one. With this one, you've got a design that I want to place on 3 different screens. Each one of those has its own plane. What I'll do, let's select our design. I'm going to cut it, edit and cut. Remember, you need to make a new blank layer. If you did it without it, any transformations you do is just going to be applied to your background layer. So layer 1, let's work on this particular screen right here. Under filter, make a vanishing point. And whoop, looks like there was some already created. If there are other vanishing points, you can always select them and delete them. There, they're gone now. And let's choose this area. Click, click. All I'm selecting are the 2 edges. Got my area. Paste. It is a large area, but when I use this tool, I can drag it into there. And you can see it's way too large to see. So what I need to do is to find the corner and to scale it down. Holding down Shift. Obviously losing my point. Until I can see the design itself going off the edge. There we go. And then I can place it right into there. If I hit OK, there it is on that one. Let's try it for another one. If I wanted to do this area, make a new layer, layer 2, filter vanishing point. I'll make a new one on here. This is the tool to create your corners. I can't see all 4 corners, but I can line it up by eye right here. Later on, I can go back and tweak it. If I need to change the size, I can drag this out. You can see there's the full. I want to make sure those 2 edges line up pretty close. That's pretty good. Again, drag it here to the edge. If I paste, Command V, there's my design. Use this tool to drag it onto this plane. And if I need to scale it down, I can do that as well. A little bit more. I'm actually giving you more area than is necessary. Pretty close. I'm going to stretch it out just a little. There we go. Make it fit. Hit return. Now it's on that one. You can do the same thing now for this particular plane. Make a new layer. Vanishing point. Got one there and there. Let's make a new one. This will create my point. Command V to paste. Grab this tool. Let's go ahead and scale it down while I can see. And we're going to drag it into this area. And it takes a lot of the guesswork out of making this fit exactly into that area without distorting it too much. Say OK. Now I've got my design on 3 different surfaces. If I wanted to pick up some of the sheen, notice that it gets a little bit lighter to darker. This is where I can play around with my different blending modes. If I use multiply, it's just going to get way too dark. If I use something closer to overlay, that would pick up some of the lighter and darker areas as well. Maybe even the soft light or hard light would look a little bit better than the other ones. As far as changing your blending modes, I think that one works pretty good. It's kind of more of an art than a science. Some of these will look better than others. If I did screen, hey, that one looks pretty good, but it's a little bit lighter than the other areas as well. This is where you just play around and see which one would give you the best results. Sometimes just keeping it normal may be the best result as well. Pretty cool? So that's using the vanishing point. The main thing to remember about using the vanishing point filter, make sure you make a new layer. If you don't make a new layer, everything's going to be on one, the background layer. You won't be able to edit or tweak it as necessary. Let's do one more. You can see the postcards. You've got a front and a back design. Recreate this, place one on each side of those. The delivery van always gives people trouble. The main reason is you don't exactly know how big you need to make it. You can make it fill up the entire area, or not. Or you can make it fill up just one little panel of it. The thing about it is, it's a little bit curved, and there is no set vanishing point that you want to place this in here. So actually using the vanishing point filter, let's cut these out, there we go. Command X, Command V. Using the vanishing point filter would probably be more problematic. I've got it on its own layer, change it to multiply. Now I can actually see what it looks like. Again, I can use my distortion transform. When I know of perspective, I can make it fit a certain area by itself. If I wanted it to follow that top edge, and maybe this bottom edge down here. Just move each one into the area. Because it's black and white on the side, when I hit return, looks like it's directly on there. Pretty cool. This is why you always want to change your blending mode. If it's normal, that's not going to look good. And it's going to be more difficult if I try to erase just the white away from that. No, no, no. You don't want to do that. Use your blending mode. That'll take care of most of your problems. Okay, so for today's exercise, you've got a variety of different ones to work from. You saw how I created these, and I'll save this and upload the video to there. But this is what I'm looking for when you create your Behance website. If you go to Behance, you see how they've staged all of their designs. Some of these don't have to be printed. They just find a blank mock-up and they placed it on those blank areas. Some of them, yeah, if you print it off, you can actually photograph your work and put it in there. This is probably a real one that they got printed on some specialty type paper. If you can find papers that have this little bit of texture to it, it's not just flat, and you change your blending mode, then it'll pick up some of the texture that's on there as well. See if I can find one that's more of a mock-up style than an actual printed one. These things. So they created this one logo design, and they're showing you what it would look like. This one's a little bit more fancy. They've done a faux bevel and emboss. In Photoshop, you've got a layer filter that does bevel and emboss, and that's all they've done is applied that to there. They've put the logo on a variety of different blank ideas, or blank mock-up pages. Pretty cool? Okay. I'm going to turn your computer back over to y'all and let y'all get started on this. Once you're finished, I want to see your advertising designs. Remember, what I'm looking for